Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon News Update for February 4th, 2025. We have so much to talk about today. Let's start with a short video clip that was recently featured on the Mormon Shrivel subreddit. The post said, "I saw someone's post on the Exmo group about an apostle confirming that many 16-year-olds are leaving the church right now. It reminded me of when Hannah Stoddard confirmed on Ward Radio 2 years ago that she knows people at church headquarters who know the data, and they are saying 75% of the youth are leaving. Give it one more generation, and I think it's going to be very lonely at church buildings, or it's going to feel like a retirement home." Now let's watch the short clip.
As we started just talking to people even within the church and working at church headquarters and who are really deep in the statistics, it's serious. We've had multiple sources confirm that approximately about 75% of millennials are leaving the church. We're losing them in droves.
Really? That high? 75% of millennials?
That high.
Really?
And that's coming from a source inside the church, faithful sources.
While this was posted on an ex-Mormon forum, it's probably good to remember that Ward Radio and Hannah would be considered faithful sources. Keeping all of that in mind, let's go to some fascinating information I found in an article written by Jim Dalrymple. He says, "I live near downtown Salt Lake City where Mormon populations are shrinking. As a result, church leaders recently reorganized the congregations in my neighborhood. Mormon congregations are defined geographically and leadership routinely shrinks or expands boundaries based on changing demographics." I don't know exactly what reorganization he is talking about, but as a reminder, 2 months ago, the LDS Church announced that 3 stakes in the Salt Lake Valley were being dissolved, consolidating 5 stakes into just 2. For weeks beforehand, members in these stakes had been receiving text messages informing them that their wards no longer existed, that they were being released from all of their callings, and that they should attend a new ward the following Sunday. However, what members didn't know until a special stake conference is that this wasn't just about their wards, it was about their entire stakes disappearing. This consolidation affected hundreds of families in the Salt Lake Valley, the historic heart of Mormonism. The church has long boasted of its growth, but that move was yet another indication that membership and activity rates are declining, even in the most Mormon-dominated state. What does it mean when the church is forced to close stakes in the Salt Lake Valley, its historical stronghold? Let's go back to what Jib was saying. He says, but this time, referring to the reorganization of congregations in his area, they did something highly unusual. They put all the families with kids into one congregation and everyone without kids in a different congregation. This is a wild experiment for Mormon congregations, or wards as we call them, because so much of the religion is based on family. A typical Sunday service is usually dominated by the din of fidgeting kids. Teenagers are asked to give brief sermons each week. A significant portion of the adults are assigned Sunday jobs that involve teaching kids. Children are omnipresent at most church functions. Aside from rare specialized congregations, those in nursing homes or those designed to help young singles meet and get married, a ward without kids is a very strange idea in a Mormon context. A side note, in my own personal experience, I can see the allure, though. When I lived in Southeast Alaska in a small branch, some members called into the service from other islands, one of which was an older couple. They often complained about how noisy the children were and how the din made it hard for them to hear sometimes. Jim goes on to say, most of the people in the family congregation seem to be adjusting well, but the transition has been harder on some of the people in the non-family ward. Effectively, there is one ward that is cool and fun, and then there is a ward that isn't quite any of those things. I can't speak to the reasons church leaders organized the congregations this way. Whatever the motivation, though, the result is that it has effectively created a ward for having kids, along with a penalty for not having them. Want to be in a cool congregation? Well, you know what to do. There are carrots and there are sticks. I'm not sure I've ever seen such an explicitly pro-natalist tactic, and there's no doubt this is an experiment with results to be determined. Maybe it will encourage young couples to have kids, or maybe it'll backfire and leave some people less connected to their religious community. I myself am not even entirely sure how I feel about this setup. But right or wrong, there's no question that in the most basic sense, it's a system that links rewards and penalties to fertility. This is absolutely the first time I am hearing about this. I haven't seen it anywhere else, and I'm wondering if anyone else has heard of this, wards in downtown Salt Lake that are split between people with kids and people without kids. I'd love to hear from someone who's actually in one of these wards. And now let's go to a post that was made by Protect Every Child on Facebook. It says, a survivor of LDS-based and enabled CSA has made a website about their experience, as they described it on the Ex-Mormon subreddit. In 1990, I told my 6th grade teacher what was happening in our home. She believed me and reported my parents. The Child Protective Services investigation was squashed by the church. The bishop, my father, a dirty Mormon cop, and my mother colluded to hide the abuses. I reported again in 1994. The Mormon Church squashed that CPS investigation as well. My co-victim died in 2004. That was like a reset back to when I was a kid. I lost my mind. In 2021, I finally went public about the Mormon Coverup. I made a website and social media presence to begin sharing my story. My goal is to help victims find their voices sooner. In 2022, the Mormon Church and my parents took me to court to shut down my website. It's still up. In 2024, I finally named the Mormon cop that was the cornerstone of preventing me from getting trauma counseling when I was 6. If you'd like to read more, go to mormoncoverup.com. Now let's go to an article with some related subject matter. A former bishop with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is facing charges nearly 2 decades after he allegedly called a 16-year-old girl into his office and abused her. Charges have been filed against Mark Lenhoff Stevens, 68, of Washington City, Utah, who served as the girl's bishop in Salt Lake County during 2006 and 2007, the time of the alleged incidents. The victim survivor met the defendant in his office at the church. The defendant began asking the teen inappropriate, intimate questions. The defendant told the juvenile that she would be expected to keep her future husband satisfied, and if her husband had issues with sin, God would hold her accountable. The defendant then walked around the desk and proceeded to assault her. Following the assault, the defendant laughed and told the juvenile, "You're just so innocent, aren't you?" The defendant reiterated that as her bishop, God had told him he needed to teach her how to keep her husband satisfied. And something that I also feel is related, and I'll talk about why in a second, let's read an email that was sent out to a ward. I could not find information on where this email was sent out, but my guess is that it was sent out to the wards in Las Vegas, where they've had a couple of failed abductions that happened during church services. Let's go to the email. Dear members of the blank ward, as many of you are aware, over the past month there have been multiple incidents both within our ward and in surrounding stakes where our youth have been targeted by individuals with harmful intentions. We are actively collaborating with our stake leaders, neighboring stakes, and local law enforcement to help prevent future incidents. To protect the safety of our youth, children, and teenagers, we are implementing additional precautions. Priesthood brethren will be assigned to provide security in the halls throughout the entirety of the church block. Quick aside, I know there are some people, and I was one of them when I was a member, I would get bothered when people would refer to the men in the church as the priesthood. So here they said priesthood brethren, when I would have wanted them to say brethren who hold the priesthood, because if women really do have the priesthood in the church and have access to it in ways that are being talked about now that never were when I was a member, then they really shouldn't say priesthood brethren. They should say brethren who hold the priesthood. And honestly, are they only going to assign people to provide security if they hold the priesthood? Let's go back to the email. Only necessary doors will remain unlocked. We ask that children and teenagers not go to the restroom or wander the halls alone in the church building or parking lot. We encourage all members to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity. Sisters, men should never be in the women's restroom. If you see this happening, please report it immediately. We also urge parents to talk with their children about safety. While we need to stay alert, we do not want to foster fear. Our ward should still be a welcoming place for investigators and visitors. We can extend warmth and kindness while also safeguarding our youth. It's important to continue to follow church policies, including maintaining 2 deep leadership when working with youth. Together we can help create a safe environment for everyone, and we are grateful for your vigilance and cooperation. And yet, they will still allow those same children and teenagers to have interviews alone with their male bishop behind a closed door. Now let's go to Instagram for something that's a little bit lighter subject matter. A new trend among young Mormons is to fill out their mission paperwork and receive their mission call without telling their family they are even doing it. They then surprise their family by calling a family meeting and reading their mission call. One such post was highlighted on Missionaries Worldwide on Instagram, where it says, "My name is Zoe Aiden, and I have been called to the Chile Concepcion mission speaking Spanish. I decided I wanted to do my mission papers all by myself and keep it a surprise for my family. Their reactions were priceless, and I felt the spirit so strong in that room with them." I hope Zoe has a good experience on her mission, because I know not all missionaries do. Here's a post about missionaries from the Ex-Mormon subreddit. It says, "I had a family member comment again to me that their mission didn't allow missionaries to have couches in their apartment, both sisters and elders. This was fairly recent, within the last 5 years, in a southern U.S. mission. The thought was the mission presidents didn't want missionaries to be lounging at home. They needed to be productive, so they had plastic or metal folding chairs to use instead. This was a mission rule that spanned several mission presidents. I still can't get over the cruelty of this rule, one that the mission presidents didn't follow but expected their missionaries to follow to increase the work. Oh, certainly at every mission president's home, there are couches." This poster is right. This missionary was offered a couch from a ward member who either pretended to not know the rule or just didn't care, but the missionary did not care anymore either, and wanted a couch and accepted it, knowing the assistant to the president had taken away other couches. The church owes the young missionaries so much for putting up with micromanaging mission presidents like these. Why do you think they're leaving the church? What ridiculous rules did you have or know which were enforced? I never did serve a full-time mission. Back then, sisters were not allowed to go until they were 21, and I knew that if I reached that age and I was not married, it would be a huge disgrace. Sisters who went on missions went because they were not pretty enough or likable enough to get married. That sounds super harsh, but that was the impression I had by the time I graduated high school, went to college, and would have been nearing mission age. To finish up today, I want to read a quote from a book that I'm reading called "But It's Your Family" by Sherry Campbell, and I want you to keep the church in mind when I'm reading this. It's talking about toxic family, but I really think it applies to the Mormon church. It says, "I have come to believe that toxic parents never wanted adult children. Instead, they wanted dependent infants. The most effective way they could keep us in an infantile and non-functioning space was to make us feel too broken to ever leave them. If we are broken, we will need them always, and they will use their counterfeit kindness to keep us coming back after we think we've finally decided that we've tolerated enough of their abuse. Going back again and again is the hardest obstacle to overcome when it comes to toxic family relationships. After all, none of us want to be familyless. We go back because we love and want to feel loved. We are healthy enough to love and to know that we need to be loved in return. Because of our parents' doses of well-orchestrated moments of intermittent kindness, we get confused. We appear to see they have good in them, but we must come to see that this is just a facade." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.